creative festival crowd. Are you ready for a lovely panel on diversity? Some of you not sure. I hope you know why you're here. So we're going to be talking about window dressing diversity. Now, window dressing is when you make it look like you're doing something, but you're not really doing that thing. Okay, and we've seen a lot of corporations do that. I'm going to read for you this lovely prepared blurb from the UK CF team. So as we know, after the Black Lives Matter marches in the UK in 2020, many brands publicly announced their commitment to and financial investment in improving diversity and representation within their businesses and industries. Emphasis on publicly, right? They were like, hey, we care. Did you see the black square on Instagram? And that might be the end of our efforts. So a lot of this promised commitment and investment did fail to materialize over time once the glow of the announcements dissipated. So me and the lovely panel that are going to join me in a second are going to discuss how creatives applying for roles within the creative industry and sector can identify when a brand's commitments are real and when they're just for play. Okay, yeah. Please welcome to the stage my lovely panel. We've got, I'm so sorry. We've got Davies, Bansal, Rani, Patel, and Josh Akapo. Thank you for joining me, guys. I'll plop here. Hello. Welcome, guys. I hope you've had a beautiful day so far. So before we get started, if we'll all introduce ourselves, who we are, what we're up to, why we care about this. I'm Kemah Bob. I'm a comedian. I am a black woman with red hair and a green floral outfit. Yeah. And may I say, it's a vibe. And I'm here, in addition to being a comedian, I've also founded the Femmes of Color Comedy Club, which is a community and platform that centers and celebrates comedians of color who are not cisgender men, because I found that my industry is very cis white male centric, and I wanted to do something about it. Yeah, that's me. If we can go over to you, Ete.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's working. You can hear me all right, yeah? Cool.
Yeah.
So I'm Ete Davies. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Dentsu Creative across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. So Dentsu Creative is Dentsu's creative agency network. I am a black man, 6 foot tall, beard, glasses, green jumper, black jeans and black trainers. Been in the industry for about 20 years. See a few familiar faces that I've worked with, working in product management, production at creative agencies.
Thank you, Ete. Over to you, G.
Hello, everyone. I'm G. I am a South Asian Indian woman. I'm wearing a black flowy dress. I'm probably around like 5'7", but I like to argue I'm like 5'7.5". My hair's kind of just past my shoulders. So that's what I look like. And then I co-founded my own marketing agency focusing on cultural marketing and creative marketing about 1.5 years ago, really to kind of be able to address like the diversity and inclusion problems that there are in the industry. I found that my voice wasn't really being heard, so met my business partner at my last agency, and then we decided just to do this ourselves.
Love that. Absolutely love that. Sorry, to the tech team. I feel like my mic is like super high, and I had a bit of trouble hearing G. Sorry. Over to you, Josh.
Hello, everybody. Oh, yeah, I don't know about the mics, but can you hear me? You good? Cool. I'm Josh Akapo. I am a black man with dreads, my favorite thing to say. And I'm about, we'll go with 5'10".
Love it.
I'm wearing a baby blue Adidas crop top, vest and a grey-blue trousers with some New Balances and a hat that says the future of creativity is clean. And I am co-founder and head of strategy at Archtype. We're a creative house that's been going for 7 years at the end of this month, and we move different through nuanced thinking, co-creating with communities, and transformative campaigns.
Yeah.
Fun. And you, Rani, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Rani Patel. I'm co-founder and MD of advertising agency Call-In, and we create advertising with a higher call-in, and we recently launched in January this year. I am a cis female of Black and South Asian descent, and I'm wearing a denim skirt and black top.
Yeah,
was this part of the requirements? I didn't realise I had to describe what I was wearing.
Oh yeah, it's for accessibility, babe.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
I'm also a Virgo. For those that care.
Great earrings as well.
Yes, and I'm wearing lots of gold.
I love it. Absolutely love it. So guys, the first question that I'm going to bring to you, that I hope you'll have a bit of fun answering, is what does a company look like when it is window dressing diversity in practice? What does it tend to look like when people are saying, yeah, that they champion diversity?
Who wants to?
Well, I mean, pick a company, pick any company,
Yeah.
It's probably window dressing diversity. To be honest with you, in the creative industries, it's not like there's many companies that are doing the right thing. If any, really. If there are, they're independent, they're probably smaller, they're probably run by founders who are marginalized themselves, so either racially marginalized, sexuality-based marginalized, or any other marginalization you can think of in society, and they will have a passion for that, from that, because they've been affected by that. But outside of those agencies and companies, there aren't really many who aren't window dressing diversity, just because the issues that are being addressed by diversity, equity, and inclusion, namely systemic oppression, racism, things that the advertising industry itself has been complicit in, it's still profiting from to this day. So that's most companies, I'd say.
And do you have any insight into, I guess, what that looks like when it's public facing? Do you know what I mean? Like how people might engage.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take it. So just building on Josh's point, it really comes down to sort of saying and not doing. And I know that sounds like a trite thing to say, but like companies that do all the things around months for communities, or will have all the flags and make all the statements of the policies, but they won't have representation throughout their company of marginalized, underrepresented groups. They wouldn't be transparent about where they are in terms of RD&I progress and what it means in things like equity, in terms of mentoring, in terms of progression, if they even have those baked systemically into the business strategy. But moreover, I think when it comes to sort of advertising, both agencies and brands, where we do honestly borrow a lot from cultures, particularly marginalized cultures in the work that we make, how much of that recognition, how much of that commercial equity and sort of representation is flowing back into those cultures. So, again, going back to the point of the window dressing part isn't just what they're saying externally or what they're trying to do through HR policy, but like you look at the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
And what does the supplier makeup look like? What are they doing to engage in networks and communities and ERGs across all the sort of various different protected characteristic groups or underrepresented groups? Like, are they walking the walk, basically, not just saying what looks good on LinkedIn or on social so that people believe that the company cares?
Do you guys have anything to add?
Yeah, and I think for me, like I've worked in marketing for the last 10 years and I've always seen similar things, which are telltales. So it's like there'll be people from underrepresented groups, but they won't sit in the leadership team. Or if they do, you won't hear your voice actually heard. They'll kind of skim past it. So it's things like that as well, which are kind of telltale signs as to, they don't really care. Or if there's, George Floyd's death, then you saw all the black squares and more black influencers on everybody's social media posts and, and feeds. But after that, you kind of see it disappearing. So it's things like that, like when they feel like they need to talk about it because they're going to get in trouble as opposed to doing it from the heart because they care. There's a lot of that. So kind of even Pride Month, Pride, that should go beyond the month as well. It should be, there's 365 days, so it shouldn't just be that 1 month you're talking up about it. It should be constant.
I think that's a really interesting point, that reactivity, keeping an eye out for a reaction to a larger event. Yeah.
Yeah, and just building on, I don't want to labor the point around financial investment, but there's a quote I heard the other day, which is basically a principle isn't a principle until you're willing to lose money against it. And it's worth looking at how much investment is put into not just internal RD&I, but into developing employees of marginalized groups in those companies to tell the difference between window dressing, which is cost you nothing to say, rather than actually trying to make change within your business to make it more inclusive for everybody.
Yeah. Basically, what you said I completely agree with. I was only going to add value in terms of when we look at our industry specifically, we have been considered after the fact it's been designed as diverse people, marginalized people. And I think the step forward is like, how do we look at our industry as an ecosystem, as an infrastructure? How do we redesign that? And I think when we look at Callin as a business that is brand new, it's born from today, and the way that we do things is in service of how things exist today versus a time before, maybe 50 or 100 years ago. And how we consume things is how we create things, how we exist as human beings today is completely different to when these ad agency systems or brand systems or businesses existed. And I think the conversation that I guess I want to be part of is like, how do we evolve that? How do we move on from that? Because there's been, for me anyway, my observations has been that the last 10 years we've been talking about how do we be more diverse, or let's be diverse and let's be inclusive, which is fantastic. The intention seems to be there, but no one seems to know how to do it. And that's the bigger question, is like, how are we creating support systems so that these businesses can do it, and who's responsible for holding them accountable for it? Because Black Lives Matter happened, and there was lots of noise, and there was lots of intentions, there was lots of things put in place, but it's like, we're 3 years on now, like, so what? Like, who is being held accountable?
And how do we hold them accountable?
And how do we hold them accountable without it also generating a fear culture? Because I think during 2020, I was obviously at a previous agency, and I launched something called Brand Share the Mic, which was getting big brands to hand over their platforms to Black content creators, because there wasn't enough equity and space for these creators, but they were creating in these spaces but just weren't seen. The thing about that was there was fear around a lot of brands coming on board, those cohorts and that coalition, because they were like, we don't have our house in order. And the thing that I was saying to them in these conversations is, you need to take one step at a time, and your first step is this, for example. And I think to show a bit of empathy, I guess, towards the industry, there is fear about getting things wrong. There's fear about having a misstep. And I think it's like, it's not about you versus them or us versus them. It's about, okay, together, in a communal way, how do we create or co-create a space and a system that is here to service more than us? And I think I feel like that's the more progressive conversation that I want to be seeing and being part of, than like, this isn't good enough. You haven't got enough brown people, you know?
1,000%. Ete, you were mentioning taking a look at where they spend the money and how they spend the money. In case people don't know, how do you find that kind of information about a business?
That's a good question, and I think that's part of the challenge, is the lack of transparency, possibly, around where money's being invested, or not even just money, but like efforts and sort of focus towards RD&I, towards the holistic ecosystem by both brands and agencies, that there isn't enough sort of public communication transparently there around, well, this is what we're doing to address things like pay equity, not just with gender, because over a certain size, the government forces you to communicate that, but that doesn't mean that you can't take that upon yourselves if you're not at that size, nor looking at, like, you know, sort of ethnicity pay gaps and so on. But also what you're doing in terms of like pushing forwards career progression, or working with more diverse, underrepresented partners in your supplier ecosystem. That's not necessarily always publicly available. You kind of have to find it either if you're in the organization, or there'll be a trade body exercise whereby they'll survey people for that. But I think there could be a lot of steps taken forward, particularly from the agency side, but also from the brand side, to actually share that information more frequently, more periodically, and just more transparently. So to Rani's point, we can actually then learn from each other, because the act of sharing it isn't just holding yourself to account, it's for others who want to get started to see what you're doing and then learn from it.
Yeah, that lack of sharing is a byproduct of how the industry, so I can only talk about ad agencies because that's all I've known for the last 15 years, but we're so exclusive because it's like, it's my idea, I'm pitching against this person, I've got to keep it to myself, it's my idea, it's my IP, and that has bred a culture of, basically, it's not a generous culture. And I think when we get into a place about sharing, cross-pollinating, communitarianism, that's something we talk a lot about at Call-In, that's where I think we get to a much more fruitful industry as well.
1,000%. So this question, I think, anticipates that there are people who want to get into the industry and want to make sure that they're not working somewhere that is window dressing diversity. In a job interview, what questions should young people, it says young diverse creatives, but young people from marginalized backgrounds, what questions should they ask to help them understand the depth of a company's commitment to diversity?
Well, first thing.
Do you think they'll tell you the truth?
Well, they're not going to tell you the truth at the job interview. Like, sorry to burst bubbles here, but first of all, if there are any young people like listening and sort of thinking, okay, how do I, as a young person, get into the industry in an equitable way and ensure that, oh, okay, I'm not walking into a company that's just going to disappoint me at every hurdle? Well, first things first, that's not your responsibility. It's the responsibility of the company that you're working at or interviewing at or even applying to. It should not be your responsibility to uncover a gem in a sea of redacted that that might be not window dressing diversity or might be better than the rest or the best of a bad lot. It shouldn't be your responsibility, because fundamentally you are at a job interview to show your capabilities as an individual and how you will help the team that you're joining, the company that you're joining, to deliver the task that was listed on your job description, and nothing more than that, unless you are getting paid for more than that. So with that being said, of course, we still live in a system, especially in advertising, where exploitation is paramount and window dressing diversity profits agencies because they don't actually have to spend money on the stuff they're saying they're doing. So then what do you do with all of this information? It's, I think, about also assessing where you're at in terms of your individual circumstances and your personal circumstances. If you are a young person, like, by the way, I'm 25 years old and Archtype is 7 years old, so you do the math of when I started in the industry. Woo! But one thing that needs to happen is assess where you're at, financially, personally, career goals-wise, what you can afford to sacrifice in order to get the career you want. And if the career you want is, in fact, worth sacrificing, principles that you might actually have as more important. I'd say assess that first before you even get into a job interview, because that's where it starts to get a little bit sticky. And it's not to say that that won't change, it's not to say that that won't sort of malleate as time goes on, because it will, but it is important to understand if, say for example, like the cap I'm wearing, the future of creativity is clean, if you are somebody who really cares about climate, for example, and you really care about the future of our world, and you don't want to work with any company in advertising who works with fossil fuel clients, that rules you out from working with just about any big agency globally. But what it doesn't do is rule you out from working in the industry. But then again, if the only opportunities that you can access are those that are given by bigger agencies, maybe it's that you understand, okay, I'm an entry-level or junior talent right now, but as soon as I have as soon as I can claw some agency back in terms of being more senior, getting more responsibility, getting more clout, getting more weight on your name, then I will make that decision and cut that off. But again, for example, if you're somebody who is, like most young people now, struggling to find a job that just pays well, to be honest, the sad thing about the system that we're in is there's not really much you can do individually to actually stop yourself from being involved or working for a company that is window dressing diversity or window dressing issues you care about, just because it's bigger than the individual. Now, yes, you can definitely ask pointed questions to your employer, and I definitely would champion that, because employers need to understand that a new generation is coming that are going to actually, not want to do things the old way, which is good, because clearly the old way has not been working. But there's just know that, like, you are an individual. There isn't as much as you can do individually. Most of our success in terms of actually changing things is going to become collective. That's going to come collectively, sorry. And don't beat yourself up about the fact that you might not be able to have the foresight as to know, oh, okay, this company I'm going into is doing a poor job of their diversity and inclusion policy, but I didn't know that going into it. Like, you're not going to be able to do that. Yeah, it happens all the time. It's happened to me so many times. So many times. It's happening to me right now. Like, as we speak, I'm going to have a feedback session, multiple feedback sessions actually, with multiple people who are not doing their jobs properly. And it happens. It keeps happening. And I say that honestly because I really want people to understand the honesty of what you're walking into in the creative industries. It's not pretty. It's work in progress. Yes, we do amazing work. Yes, we're able to really communicate and impact and do so many cool things, but it is not pretty. It is not cute. It's not at all. Sorry, that's all I wanted to say.
I think all of that is really fair and valid. I was just going to add 2 points, because I'm a pragmatist, and the systems that currently rule these industries weren't designed for diverse people. That is the reality of it. And I think I always saw finding the agency for me, and I give this advice to people that I mentor, as dating. You kind of have to go out there and see what's out there and meet a few people and kiss a few frogs. But I think what's really important about the dating experience that you can kind of parallel into looking for that job or that home agency is that be really honest and transparent about your expectations, and that will always differ at what stage you are in your career. If you're trying to get your foot in and you know that isn't going to be your forever home, to your point, then it's my expectation is I need to come in here, graft, gain a load of experience. I want to be put on some of the highest profile brands. I need you to know that, and we can do this, but it might change as you evolve and become more senior. And I think if you're honest about your expectations with the people that are recruiting you and the business that you're going into, then you have a space later on, if those expectations aren't met, to hold them account, because that conversation has happened. I think there's a naivety that maybe junior talent have, that I've observed from the outside, have gone into businesses, and because they have been approached, because they come from a different background, because they have a different lived experience, they feel flattered and they feel seen, and in the process they don't see that this is a value exchange, and what you have to work out is what your value is in that business, but what do you need to get back out of it? So that's my advice, because you can't avoid window dressing. You don't know what the hidden agendas are. You don't know what it's really going to be like in that situation. You have to take a leap of faith. You have to, take a risk. Everything is a bit of a risk. So that was the one thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is that if you get in there and you find out that they're not about that life, they don't have skin in the game, they're not really giving you what you thought you wanted, I wouldn't be mad at that. I would see it as okay, how do I be a vehicle of change? There's so many businesses that I've gone into and they didn't have skin in the game, and it was clear that they were hiring a black and brown woman because it looked a certain way, but they weren't really into my gold hoops and my edges. They weren't really into the look and feel of me. They wanted me to just show up and do the work and perform. But in those spaces, I found an opportunity to be influential and make change, and in spaces that I have felt safe even more so. And I'm really proud of that, because it means that I've been able to navigate the industry and allow other people to be seen and feel that they can also enter that space.
Thank you,
Yeah.
guys. Thank you.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that question about, I guess, how young creatives can go about understanding the depth of a company's commitment?
So I think I agree with the guys, like you never really know what it's going to be like until you're there and you have experience of it, or unless you know someone who is there. And oftentimes they do hire people that look diverse, so it looks good. I've had the same experience, but I think, it's nice to like kind of voice your opinion, like the guy said as well in the interview, and make it known that this is super important to you. So I think that's kind of, as we all do that, it's getting rid of the awkwardness that there is around the DEI topic in the first place, so they know it's something that's important to you. And if you do want to delve into it, of course, they can kind of tell you one thing or tell you something you want to hear, but if you ask them about the initiatives they have in place, ask them, how do you actually measure this? Like, what does that actually look like and what does that actually mean? So they could say they're diverse, but you can go further and ask, like, do you have any goals in place, any objectives in place? What does this actually look like? Where do you want to be in a year's time? What kind of training and things are you actually doing to help people that come from a different background? So I think that's kind of one practical way of looking at it, and just kind of, even just you kind of raising your voice and saying that it's important to you is important, because it shows them that it's something that you care about. So whether they take that on or not, it's helping to remove the stigma and awkwardness for all of us in talking about the topic. So I think kind of that's one thing you can do.
That's huge. And then keep an eye out for that. Just like you were saying, kind of like, okay, but are you doing what you said you were going to do?
Yeah.
For me, for the community at large. Yeah, brilliant. Anything to add, I think?
I mean, nothing more than what's so brilliantly been put there. And I think Josh's point around like the pragmatism, because you definitely should ask those pointed questions. And as G said, like be concrete around the things that you're asking, because it's a sell process for the business as much as it is, for you sort of selling yourself in the interview. So you're going to be told things that you want to hear. And the only way you can pick apart what's true is you have to sort of dive into that a little bit more. And as Josh said, it shouldn't really be on the candidate. The one point that G said, which might be a useful bit of information, is if you know anyone in your network, ask them. Outside of the interview process, ask even particularly ex-employees or people that that can trust, so that you can just get the other take around the culture, whether the business or the organization is sort of living or sort of the things it's saying. And if you don't know anyone, there is like a website I think called Glassdoor, where employees basically talk about their experience. And
Ask All.
Glassdoor.
Glassdoor. Oh,
yeah.
I've never been to either of those websites.
Yeah, well,
Handy one.
worth looking at. If you don't have a network and there's no points of reference that you can sort of find from people you trust about their experience, that is where anybody at any company goes in and submits everything, basically, from how they felt about the company delivering on its mission to the salary they were paid. And yeah, you can use that as a reference point. But everything that everyone's just said before, I totally agree with.
Nice one. Thank you, guys. In addition to Glassdoor, do you guys know of any other organizations that young creatives, that creatives period, can reach out to support them and help them navigate the employment process to ensure they have a more comprehensive understanding of what to look for or what to ask when it comes to a company's approach to DEI?
I'll give a shout out to the We Are Stripes crew down there. They've been doing it for several years for culturally diverse and sort of underrepresented talent, through mentoring, through careers fairs, through sort of connecting across recruitment channels and internships. So there are lots of organizations like We Are Stripes, Commercial Break, the Creative Foundation is one, sort of Media for All. Just look them up. But those guys sat right there. Talk to them if you're looking.
Nice one. Do you guys have any tea to spill?
Actually, yeah, I'm going to shout out my mum right quick, because she runs Joined Up Thinking, which is a youth mentoring organization that helps young people aged 11 to 25 stand out and reach their potential. So I'm marketing and brand partnerships director there, and I have been also for 7 years. And one thing that we do, this will be our 5th year doing this, I think, which is crazy, but we do a creative media training program. This year, we slightly changed the name, Creative Skills Training Program, but it's basically the same thing. What it does is it offers young people the opportunity to get paid work experience in creative agencies and get employability training and get creative skills training all in like a 6-week stint. And it's very quick, it's very fun, it's very fast, but what it does do is it allows you to be in a general home space of a youth mentoring organization that was started up by Black people, by marginalized people, by working class people, by people who had understood sort of what marginalization is and how it operates in society, then connect that with employability and creative skills training so that you can actually get stuck in and understand what's going on in the creative industries. It's quite multifaceted, from music to art to photography to culture, and the employability training does a lot in terms of giving young people self-confidence to like come up, and then you get paid work experience so you can see for yourself. You'll be able to go in there and see, oh, I quite like paid media, or oh, I don't, or oh, I quite like feeling strategic or feeling a bit like a planner, or actually I quite prefer creative stuff. And you get a feel for it, and that can also give you a bit more confidence to then like, yeah, have your next roles and do more of what you said, which is like go into treating it a bit like dating, finding out which agency is actually for you, what kind of spaces you like, and yeah, that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's one. That program starts in September at some point, but I'm not the best person to even ask about that, which is terrible because I work there, but never mind.
That's brilliant. I'm going to have to pretend to be 24.
Yeah, I'm like, maybe I can. So yeah, I had two. So Who's Your Mama is a mentoring organisation. It's been around for years. I used it years ago to find one of my long-standing mentors, and it focuses on women in the creative industry and partnering them up with other female mentors. And then the other one was NABS, which I'm not sure if anyone really knows about them, but I think we don't have trade unions in the industry because we're obviously a private sector, but NABS, I guess, I think it's like a charity organisation, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's there to help all levels in the industry just navigate some of the issues that come around the working systems, whether it's like support with HR or any of that kind of stuff, like stress in the workplace. So I think as you're entering the industry as a young person, there's so many systems you have to navigate, and I think NABS is always a good one to kind of check in on and understand, like, you know, how the pensions work, or I think I'm potentially, you know, entering some sort of difficult situation with my manager. How do I navigate that? So those would be my two.
Brilliant. Oh, so much on offer here. Do you know of any?
Yeah, I know a couple. So I know of Social Fixed, which is by a DJ called Mercedes Benson. And kind of she got into the creative industry, she broke through barriers, and now she's got her own company where she kind of helps creatives get in the same way she did. There's a lot of like mentoring, workshops and things like that. There's also Brixton Finishing School as well, which is a similar thing. So I think they do like courses on there. So again, for underrepresented creatives, trying to break in, and yeah, those two are great. I would also say that don't underestimate the power of LinkedIn, because I think if you're following people on there, or there's people in your network or outside of your network that you're inspired by or are doing great things in the space, you never know what could come off dropping them a message. I've done it before, people have done it to me, and there's just so many people who are willing to help. We're also trying to break into the industry at one point, so kind of they'll be happy to kind of grab a coffee with you, or you know, meet you and give you some advice, or even potentially mentor you. So I think don't underestimate the power of LinkedIn, 100%.
Nice one. Thank you, guys. I want to ask, do you guys see great examples from other industries of a true commitment to DEI that the creative industries could learn from?
I think everyone's got a lot of progress to kind of make on that. I think if there's like a good example I can reference, I think retail are sort of making great strides, or if you believe the data that gets sort of published by the British Retail Consortium, that they're making a lot of progress, particularly in representation and progression and pay equity and compensation across all the protected characteristics, from ethnicity to gender to age and to disability, LGBTQ. And a lot of what they're doing is actually stuff that's been talked about for a long time. So making it a clear agenda priority of boards, of exec teams, being really clear about the objective behind RDI and how it ties into the business strategy over and above just let's get a number of these type of people in the business. Like, how is it actually creating wider value for you? Critically partnering with sort of organizations, institutions, specialists outside of their network, because the belief that a company that isn't diverse or representative is suddenly going to fix the problems within itself is naive. And I think retail seems to, well, again from the report, seems to realize that a bit more than other industries. But I think across the board there's a long way to go. I mean, arguably one of the most sort of culture and ethnically represented industries that we have in the UK is healthcare, the NHS. But that has a myriad of institutional problems around lack of inclusivity, racism, and so on. So just because you've got the numbers doesn't actually mean that the progress has been made. So yeah, short answer to your question, I think retail is making progress, but everybody needs, there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah, agreed. What about you guys? Any examples you see?
I mean, I don't know if we're in the position to look towards a savior industry, if that makes sense. I don't think that it doesn't feel like it makes sense to sort of look upwards if we're trying to address window dressing diversity. And if we're trying, and not just that, but if we're trying to address actually representing and including and having equity for people who we've been marginalizing this entire time. Because it's like, the society, I'm not just speaking like this, I'm trying to also ensure that we understand points, but the society we're in is also oppressive in this way. So it's not that different industries exist outside of that and then they're sort of in a pocket and then they can come back in and then drop back out. They can't do that.
They're in context.
It's all in the same context. So, and to be honest, something that I love from independent agencies in our industry and generally independent businesses, I'd say across industries and across sectors, is their ability to work laterally with each other, because they kind of know that working and sort of looking up and only looking up doesn't serve them as well. And I think maybe that's what we need to maybe implore in this, the kind of understanding that all of us aren't doing as well as we would like, so then working across and seeing who's doing what well and plucking and seeing how we can shape something that's new and that actually works.
So we're getting short on time. I want to ask, we have one more question, but we can kind of bop it if there are questions out there. Does anyone in the audience have a question? Oh, we have a question in the back. Very exciting.
Hi, thank you so much. It's been such a good discussion. I'm Natalie and I run a platform called Everyday Racism, which is the largest UK anti-racism platform in the UK. So this has just been really, really helpful. And obviously running a platform like that, we have a lot of people contacting us about, the tokenism, the black squares, how people have been treated in the industry. And obviously, I guess I just wanted to talk about really the importance of diversity, because for me, obviously, diversity is really good, but it's not the answer. And, demanding a seat at the table isn't necessarily a radical transformation. I think it's basically a need to be recognised by those in power, and that's why capitalism loves diversity and equality, because it doesn't threaten the power and class structure, because people just end up upholding the systems in place, a system that isn't actually built for them. So this is quite a big question, but what would your advice be for people in the industry and young people who are being approached by companies who want to do like a tick box exercise, or, you know, are like, come, I'm more diverse, but actually there's no systemic change and there's actually nothing going on behind the scenes? And do you think marginalized communities and people from the global majority, so that's not just race, but like trans people, disabled people, do you think we just need to be creating our own spaces because actually, or creating our own table because it's not really working trying to go to the main table? Does that make sense? Quite a lot there, but yeah.
Yeah.
It was
I mean, there's a lot in that.
Yeah.
And actually a lot that I agree with. I'd say a few things in response to that. So creating our own table, our own economies, our own industry, that's happening. You know, you've got people running their independent agencies, like many people going outside of the corporate environment, because it isn't about getting a seat at a table that was never really laid for you as a guest. It's about having your own, you know, table and you deciding who sits at it and, you know, how you want to build it as an inclusive organization. So that is happening, and even more frequently. I'd say there is a point that Rani made about being an agent for change as well, because, you know, at some point, all the parts of the ecosystem need to find some way to function together. So as much as we need sort of to be building our own environments for success, we also need agents of change in some of those environments to make sure that we're not operating in a complete silo that actually hampers our own sort of ambitions. And then finally, to Josh's point, there's always an element of pragmatism, particularly in the current environment we find ourselves. So, you know, if you're a young person that's just trying to get a job and break into the industry, then, and Josh put it much better than I did, think about it in terms of the long term, where you are right now, probably what you need to do to get yourself on track to building your skills, your reputation, your capability, your network. And at the point when you decide, and you said it as well, value exchange, that the value exchange is no longer helping accelerate you, then yeah, go off and, you know, build your own thing, you know, create your own table, or decide that you've reached a point where you can be influential enough to change things.
Yeah. I was just going to add, it was a meaty question. Thank you so much for it. I think Essay's done a good job of tackling it. But I was just going to add that your point around young talent being brought into businesses that are from diverse backgrounds to help support the business develop something, like a TikTok brief or something like that, I think you said. And I think it's a really important question, actually, around this idea around appropriation versus appreciation. Because I think as a diverse group of people, we input to a lot of things in culture that people value and are appreciated, and it leads the way. But it's you having the discernment of knowing when you're being appropriated and when something, why you exist or what you are part of is being appropriated versus being appreciated. And I think that's the thing that we can support everyone in understanding, those that are giving and those that are also taking, because there's a big thing around safeguarding those communities that we care a lot about at Call-In, is that if a brand or a business goes into a community and is partaking or, you know, taking something from that, they're leaving something of value back. So if it's back to the value exchange thing, you know, if you're working in the queer community, what are you leaving behind that mobilizes that queer community to continue to thrive?
Mm-hmm. I love that. Do we have any other questions out there? Okay. There's one last question here that I'd love to end on. And I think you've chatted about it a bit, but I just want to drill it home in case there are people here within this industry who would like to do something, which I hope there are. What more could we be doing within this industry so that young people don't have to play Sherlock homegirl and investigate brands and agencies in the first place?
I think for me, I think I've mentioned it earlier, but it's just everybody being more transparent around these conversations and not feeling awkward, or like you've said something, if you might say something offensive, like if it feels like a safe space and everyone speaks about it, the more it will just become so normal, and it will just have to these conversations will have to be had. So I think it's just having that transparency, and I think because unfortunately a lot of the owners for DE&I comes onto diverse people, and often it's those in the senior leadership teams that aren't diverse that need to be doing something. So it's having that transparency so they know that something's going on. Of course they should know it anyway, but really honing it in, because there's a study as well around the media and advertising industry, 80% of Black, Asian, minority people wanting to leave because it's not inclusive, but it's a disparity because the white people in those companies, the senior leadership teams, think that they've done enough. So there's a disparity happening between what's actually happening and what they think is happening. So they think they're doing a great job, but they're actually not. So I think there just needs to be more openness and transparency with everyone. The more we speak about it, the more things can actually happen and be done about it.
Providing more opportunities for feedback, as well as transparency with the public.
And even anonymous feedback. I know sometimes it can be awkward to mention certain things for junior staff members and things like that. So whether there's an external body that comes in and does some surveys and things like that, or that you can talk to impartial HR members that you can talk to. Just there needs to be more more of a safe space to speak about things.
And just to add to that point, and also to build on a point that you mentioned earlier around people within agencies and within creative brands and within the advertising industry as a whole, of having this fear of doing the wrong thing, or this fear of not being able to have their house in order entirely before now, people from marginalized communities, diverse people start now coming into companies and sort of seeing holes and picking holes. And I think what we so desperately need to bring back is responsibility and accountability. Those things are not bad. Those things are essential for the runnings of, mankind in general. We need to be accountable to one another and responsible to and for one another. That's how this works. And the same thing goes in this industry. If you are working in a company, if you are a leader in a company, mid-level, junior, it's sort of... in terms of what you can do individually, the lengths you can go, that does depend on sort of, your weight, your seniority, the amount of responsibility that you're given in your company, the amount of weighting you have in the industry, etc. But generally, we all have a responsibility to ensure that we are representing and ceasing the oppression of people who we've been complicit in oppressing. So with that requires, we will have to take accountability for stuff we do wrong, and we all get stuff wrong, and that's okay. But where it stops being okay is if we blissfully ignore it, or we purposefully push past it because we don't care. So let's be responsible to each other, for each other, and let's be accountable for not only what we're doing wrong, but for what we will continue to do right, hopefully a lot more, going forward. That's it.
Yeah.
Appreciate that. Oh, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Another round of applause.